Hello, and welcome to the Drive More Performance in the Tire and Automotive Business webinar. My name is Pat Summers, and I'm the Vice President of Delivery at 4R Systems, and I will be monitoring the session. This presentation is one of several webinars presented by the 4R Systems Client Delivery Team. This webinar will be recorded and will be available on our website post-event, along with all of our other previously recorded web sessions. As a little note before we get started, all the phone lines are currently muted and will remain muted throughout the presentation. We will be taking questions via the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen throughout the webinar, and the questions will be answered at the end of the session. We will answer as many questions as possible that time allows. And now, I would like to introduce your presenter, Laura Petrescu, Client Manager. Laura?
Thanks, Pat. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Petrescu, and as Pat mentioned, I'll be taking you through some of the features we have to offer here at 4R that were designed specifically with the tire and automotive industry in mind. Keep in mind, however, that these features are relevant to other industries and can be applied to your business if you think it makes sense. Before we dive into the specific features, let's do a quick review of 4R's bread and butter, our profit optimal reorder point. Anyone listening today that is familiar with 4R knows that our core philosophy is based around profit optimal reorder points. What does that mean? Let me explain. Our profit optimal approach works to balance two costs: loss margin, which are incurred when an item stocks out, and the inventory carrying costs. The two costs are interrelated. The lower the inventory carrying cost, the higher the loss margin will be, and vice versa. Our algorithm seeks to find the right balance by calculating reorder points that minimize the loss margin and also minimize the inventory carrying costs, thus profit optimal. Now that we've covered the basics, let's move on to the features that we have developed specifically for the tire and automotive industry. There are 6 features that I will be reviewing in detail today. I'll give a description of each feature, discuss how we go about implementing it, and also talk about the effect each feature has on our reorder points. The 6 features I will discuss today are multiple sale requirement, tiered loss sales, substitution, service revenue, line of business pricing, and hub and spoke model. Let's get started. The first feature we will discuss is called multiple sale requirement, or MSR for short. MSR is the smallest demand quantity of any single item to satisfy the customer's need. The assumption with MSR is that the customer will walk away without purchasing anything if the inventory is less than the MSR. The best example of this feature can be applied to tires. Tires typically have a demand of 1, 2, or 4 units. Thus, the MSR for tires would normally be 4. This is because you never want to have less than 4 in stock in case the next customer that comes into the store is in need of a full set of tires. The MSR can be fed to us in a weekly feed at the SKU store level. Our algorithm will then use this input to ensure that the profit optimal reorder point calculated will always be in a multiple of the MSR. So for the tires example, the reorder point would be 4, 8, 12, 16, so on and so forth. Next up is tiered loss sales. Tiered loss sales uses transactional data that helps our system understand the distribution of demand for our particular item or class. Tiered loss sales is best explained by giving an example. Let's revisit tires. As discussed previously, the demand for tires is in multiples of 1, 2, or 4. For easy math, let's say they all sell equally. So 33% of the time, 1 tire is purchased, 33% of the time, 2 tires are purchased, and 33% of the time, 4 tires are purchased. For a normal item without tiered loss sales, the loss sales would start to be scored when an item stocks out. That is, there are 0 units of inventory on hand. However, with tiered loss sales, the loss sales will start to be scored when the inventory drops below the tiered demand values. So in the example of tires, when inventory drops to 3 units, 33% of lost sales are scored. When the inventory drops to 2, again, only 32% of lost sales are scored. When inventory drops below 2 units, now 66% of lost sales are scored. This is because the inventory available will only fulfill demand 33% of the time. Finally, when the inventory drops to 0, 100% of the lost sales are scored. Tiered loss sales is modeled by 4R based on historical transaction data, and the data feed can be received by 4R that assigns a specific percentage of loss demand for these model categories. When tiered loss sales are in place, the loss sales scored are more accurate and typically higher. This subsequently causes the reorder point to rise slightly. The third feature I will discuss today is substitution. Substitution takes place when a customer will substitute another similar product if the original desired item is not in stock. This feature can be applied to many product categories, but applies to tires more so because of the lack of specific preference among similar SKUs. Substitution rates differ based on the breadth of assortment of similar SKUs available in a given store. The more substitutable items that are available, the higher the substitution rate will be. 4R has the ability to accept a feed that defines the possible substitutions for a SKU. The algorithm will then estimate the substitution rate for each item as a function of the available assortment. This substitution rate is then used when calculating the reorder points. The more substitutable items that are available in a given store, the lower the reorder point will be. Next is service revenue. This feature is available for business models that incorporate an element of service into their business. This is especially relevant for the automotive industry, as service is a big portion of their overall revenue. 4R has developed a solution to accept an associated service dollar component for each SKU, which is then added to the product margin. Our algorithm takes margin into account when calculating the profit optimal reorder point. So the additional service revenue that is associated to each SKU leads to a slightly higher and more accurate reorder point due to the higher margin. 4R has the ability to receive the data feed that defines the margin percent at the SKU level or above. The next feature I will discuss is line of business pricing. The retail price of an item can vary depending on the line of business it is being sold through. For example, an automotive retailer might have 3 lines of business: a service line of business, a do-it-yourself line of business, and a commercial line of business. This feature assumes that the demand for all 3 lines of business will be serviced out of the same inventory bucket. 4R has the ability to accept the POS data for all 3 lines of business, thus resulting in a sales-weighted average price for each SKU store. Promotions for different lines of business can also be modeled so that the lifts for each line of business are calculated appropriately and accurately. For instance, a promotion on oil in DIY might yield a lift of 1.5, but a promotion in the commercial line of business for that same SKU could yield a lift of 3.0. The end result for the line of business pricing is that the reorder points will be more accurate due to the sales weighted average price. The last feature I will discuss today is hub and spoke store model. Hub and spoke store model is used when a retailer has a circuit of stores set up in the same geographic region, and one store is used as a sort of mini DC to supply other stores within the same circuit. The mini DC store is the hub, and all the other stores in the circuit are the spokes. This is used primarily for SKUs which are very slow-moving, like application-specific parts. The benefits are twofold. There's an inventory savings since not all stores need to carry every single SKU, and stock balancing can be done in order to put the right inventory in the right locations where and when they are needed. 4R has the ability to accept the POS data feed for SKUs sold in the spoke stores but stocked in the hub stores. The demand is then mapped back to the hub store that replenished the spoke store. This results in the reorder point being attributed to the store where the inventory is stocked rather than where the demand took place. To recap, we covered 6 different features today that can be applied to your business to drive more performance: multiple sales requirement, tiered loss sales, substitution, service revenue, line of business pricing, and hub and spoke store model. All of these features are currently available for use and can be set up by working directly with your client services team here at 4R. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you learned something new and useful for your business.
Well, thank you, Laura. Now, what we'd like to do now is to open up for questions. Doing so, we're going to keep the line muted, but there's a chat box to the right of the webinar on GoWebinar. If you have any questions, just post those there, and I'll pose those to Laura. We'll try to answer as many as we can. I'll pause for a moment. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat room. Okay, it looks as though we have one, actually it looks like we have two questions coming in. So first question I see is, on average, how much will the lost sales actually increase when implementing the tiered lost sales feature?
So this depends on the distribution of demand and how an item is typically purchased. For example, when we implemented it for the tires categories, we saw that the lost sales increased by roughly 15% on average. But an item that's typically bought in twos, for instance, probably wouldn't see as much of an increase.
Okay. Well, on to our second question. This question is about MSR and tiered loss sales. Are MSR and tiered loss sales dependent on each other?
No, they are mutually exclusive. They can be interrelated, but an item does not have to have MSR in order to have tiered loss sales applied to it.
Great, thank you, Laura. Do we have any further questions from the audience? If so, please do post those. We're going to continue to hang on here for another 10 or 15 seconds if you have questions. Keep in mind, if there's anything regarding this webinar, you can see that will be posted to our website, and we are certainly open to you contacting us directly to pose any further questions if you'd like. Actually, we have one more question that's just come in. This question has to do with the use of the features in conjunction with one another. Can several of these features be used together, or can you only use one for a single SKU?
Any of the features can be used and will collectively have an impact on the reorder point for a SKU. Keep in mind, these are just some of the features, and modeling can be employed.
Laura, isn't this where the client delivery team really comes in?
Yes, this is where the client delivery team works with our clients to understand and analyze and test how to best employ these models and capabilities to profitably achieve their business objectives.
Great, thank you, Laura. I'll pause again for a moment if there's any further questions. Okay, I think that's what we have for now. If you have any further questions, please reach out to your client manager or anyone at 4R, and we'll get those questions answered. Thank you, Laura, and thank you all for attending this webinar. We have another one coming up in October, which is through the client delivery team. All of these webinars are posted to our website at 4rsystems.com/webinars. You can see our full schedule there, as well as those we have done in the past. I'd like to say thank you all for joining, and look forward to having you join us in a future 4R Systems educating retailers to be more profitable. Thank you.